Hi everyone. In spring 2021, we've released 16 new Raw Pu-erh cakes. And while looking at the website, I figured it's getting like we're starting to have a lot of products at the same time, and it might be difficult for you to choose from these products. So in this video, I'm going to do a quick run over of the products. Let me start with the Jing Mai. So first, let's talk a bit about the 2021 season, the spring 2021. It was a strange season because we got rain right before the first flush, and that's true for most of the mountains. So you will get very few teas from before the rain. And that rain episode lasted for 3-4 days, and right after that we got massive sprouts in the gardens. And this is true from Monku to Mong Hai and Iwu. So it's quite the characteristic of this season compared to, for example, 2020, which was very dry all throughout the season. So maybe you might expect to get a weaker tea this year. We'll see. I'm still very happy with our production this year, but I think it can be a good challenge for you to compare the 2021 harvest with the harvest from 2020 and 2029, which were both very dry years. Okay, anyway, let's start with the Jing Mai. So we've got the Miyun here. This is our entry-level cake that we make in our own factory. So all the teas in Jing Mai are made in our factory, processed by us. This year we were 3 people to process. There was my wife, my employee, and myself. We made about 600 kilo of handmade tea and a little bit of machine-made tea as well. So we've got the Miyun, which is you can say plantation tea from natural tea gardens, from young gardens. And this is the Gulan, which is made exclusively from ancient tea gardens. And exclusively actually from Taipingzhang area, the plateau on top of Jing Mai. So of course this one is much more expensive than the Miyun. The ancient tea gardens cost more, but you will definitely feel the difference in the cup. In terms of profile, I'm quite used to drinking Jing Mai tea, so it's kind of my baseline. I think what characterizes Jing Mai the most is the fast huigan you get. It's like a very straightforward tea in the way that all the main components of the tea will come up in the second and third infusion. So even though, for example, the Gulan can be quite long brewing, you will get the character of this tea very quickly. And I think the Jing Mai terroir achieves a good balance between bitterness. You'll get some bitterness, especially with the Gushu. You'll get great fragrance, typically in a Jing Mai tea. You'll get moderate sweetness, some astringency, more than what you'd find in Mong Hai or Iwu, for example. And overall, a balanced profile. People say they're on the soft side, but if you have really good Jing Mai tea, it's not really true. I think you can have very potent tea in Jing Mai. And that's why we made that more exclusive pressing, which is only single trees, so it's the biggest trees in our gardens. And this one is more potent. It's maybe not as fragrant and as complex in terms of fragrance as the Gulan, but you'll get more qi and more huigan out of this cake. It's also very long brewing. So we only have three cakes for Jing Mai, and all of them were made in our factory. Now let's go south, and we're going to go to Mong Hai area. Let's start from the southernmost terroir, which is almost at the Burmese border, and that's Meng Noy, also called Weidong, and it's a honey village. And you could say it's kind of the average village in Bulangshan, nothing exceptional, except that to me it really embodies all the qualities you'd find in a decent, robust Bulang tea. So it has some bitterness, although it's not really nasty. I don't really like the bitter varietal, so Bulangshan has this reputation to have the bitter tea, but it's not the case actually everywhere in all villages. So this is from a fairly young plantation tea, but it's also managed without pesticides, just like in Jingmai. So you could say it's the equivalent of the Jingmai Miyun for Bulangshan. You'll get a good introduction to Bulangshan. And if you're a beginner, actually, I would recommend to go for those entry-level cakes so that you get a taste of each terroir, and so that you still have some room to get more better experiences in the future with better cakes. Now, talking of better cakes, then the grade above the Meng Noy will be the Lao Man E Shengtai. So Meng Noy is from Lao Man, it's about 20 kilometers away, I would say, or maybe slightly more. Lao Man is the most famous village in Bulangshan. So Bulangshan is quite a vast area. It's basically all the southwest of Mong Hai up to the Burmese border. That's called Bulangshan. And this cake, it's the same quality as these. It's like natural plantation tea trees, which I've heard they're supposed to be like 20 years old, but it might be a conservative estimate because when you taste the tea, it really doesn't taste like young trees. But there they have also a very good soil, like they make really good tea. So maybe the great terroir might make up for the young age of the trees. But anyway, you could say it's an upgraded experience compared to Meng Noy. You'll get a more intense bitterness because there's some of the bitter varietal tea in that blend. So of course, when I say blend, it's a blend within the village. So the producer will source tea from different tea gardens around the village and will decide on how to make a blend, just like we do in Jing Mai. And so in this blend, he included a bit of bitter varietal, but not too much. So this is as bitter as it gets, I would say, in my selection. Of course, you can find much more bitter teas from other vendors, but I'm not a fan of that Kuchra bitter tea. To me, what really makes the character of Lao Man E and that overall Bulang area is the more of a light body, I would say. It's not oily thick, so it's more of a light body, and you'll get some bitterness, but what really characterizes the area, I think, is the sweetness, but not a heavy sweetness like Yiwu tea, more I don't know, a kind of faster sweetness, but which is also very intense. And you'll get deep huigan. Even in the small trees, you get a good huigan in that area, and usually a good body feel if you're sensitive to this. And it's more a tea for the throat, for the back of the mouth and the throat, than it is for the nose. Although all the area has a distinct fragrance, which some could say it's a bit smoky, but it's not smoke. It's not related with having smoke in the factory. I think it's really the character of that area, which is slightly smoky, animal, a bit leathery. And so this is the best we have to offer. This is the best we offer from southwest Mong Hai, from Bulang area. And so this is the Gushu. So the big trees, actually, only the big trees were picked for this harvest from Lao Man E. So, of course, this is extremely expensive tea, and well, I hope your purse can cope with your hobby and your passion for tea. I think this is a problem we all have as tea enthusiasts. But yeah, I can tell you that once you've paid and forgotten the price, it's really a great experience. So I'd recommend you get a sample anyway, just to taste like the difference. And you could say it's less bitter because it's only the sweet varietal, this one. There's no bitter varietal in the blend, but it's more intense in terms of chachi, in terms of huigan. in terms of that returning fragrance, which is a bit more complex in this one, and the sweetness, yeah, that kind of... it's interesting because I cannot say the soup is very thick. It's not like Iwu tea, but it's mouth coating in a way. You can feel it on your gum. It's very active. So yeah, it's a very intense experience. And I wouldn't recommend it for every day, because if you drink that kind of tea every day, then when your friends invite you for the tea, you will always find that their teas are subpar, and you still want to keep some friends anyway. So I wouldn't recommend drinking the best teas every day. Just keep it for your birthday or for the weekend or something like that. So we're done with Bulangshan. So we've done Jingmai, Bulangshan, and now we're gonna move east of Mong Hai. Well, let's go by geography and take the closest place. And now we're gonna go to Pasha. Pasha is not too far from Lao Man E, actually. You could say like you have Lao Man E there, then you have Lao Banzang, and then you have Pasha. And well, it's actually a quite pricey mountain, despite it often been overlooked when we're talking about the famous mountains of Mong Hai. It might be due to its relatively low yield. It's 3 villages. They are not small, but I don't know, it's fairly accessible nowadays from Mong Hai, but it seems that it hasn't been very famous in terms of people knowing about it, but the tea has always been quite expensive there. And this is for one reason, is that, in my opinion, it's one of the closest tastes you can find to Lao Banzang tea. Okay, around Lao Banzang you will have other villages which have similar taste, like Baka Noy, but Pasha is also, in my opinion, quite similar. It's not as strong, as powerful as Lao Man E tea in terms of bitterness and like upfront aggressiveness, but it's really a well-balanced Mong Hai taste. So if you really want to have one great cake of Mong Hai, well, maybe to start, actually, if you're not familiar with Mong Hai, you could actually try that Bulangshan cake and maybe that Pasha cake. So this is the small trees from the ancient tea gardens, and this is the big trees from the ancient tea gardens. And here the price difference is also vast. So in each mountain they will have different ways in which they separate, well, the way they sell the tea. For example, in Jing Mai, we usually have a mixed harvest of like the small and medium-sized trees, and keep the big trees for a big harvest, which we call single trees. And in Pasha, they just sell small trees and big trees. So it's the same as Iwu, you could say. But yeah, when you taste the tea, the character is the same, but the intensity is different. So you could say it's a bit like listening to the same music, but with much better speakers. Yeah, that could be an analogy, I guess. Although you could also make this analogy with the water you use. But anyway, so yeah, Pasha Gushu is also very expensive. It's almost the same price as Lao Man E tea. And yeah, and because its taste is very similar to Lao Banzang, actually, a lot of that tea, at least before, was bought by people in Lao Banzang. They are relatives, they are from the same lineage, Nannuo, Pasha, and Lao Banzang. They are all Hani minority, and so they have many relatives in those villages. And so, of course, if you make tea in Pasha, you're better off selling it to your cousins or your uncle in Lao Banzang, where he will be able to sell it for an outrageous price. Well, you could say a true luxury tea. So you could say that Pasha doesn't have that luxury reputation, and I would say that, yeah, even if it's expensive, same as Lao Man E actually, it's expensive, but it's worth it. I keep buying that because I think you get your money's worth in the cup. Because, like that Lao Man E Gushu, even big factories in Mong Hai, when they want to make premium blends, they can buy that Lao Man E Gushu even at this price. It's not really for tourists. Like every day, all the big factories in Mong Hai go to Lao Man E. And the trade in Pasha is a bit different also because they have less output than Lao Man E. So yeah, you have two versions, and this is the small trees, which is cheaper, but still very, very potent, very decent, and the Gushu, which is expensive. And then close to Pasha, so we have Nannuo. Pasha is the first year that we're making this tea. We had the Pasha last autumn, but it's the first spring version, and I'm happy with this farmer skill, so I think I will keep buying. And you see, we use the design, actually, it's a Hani minority, actually, for those villages, because they are Hani. And so we have Nannuo. So Nannuo, we've been working with Tafa, the farmer who makes those cakes, for quite a long time, 4 or 5 years, I guess, maybe even more, actually. He's a very conscientious guy, and he produces consistently good teas, so I never have to worry about trying a sample before buying or something, because I know that I will get the best that he can make. So this is the Gushu from Nannuo. Now the Gushu from Nannuo, they are not really huge. They are not like in Pasha or in Lao Man. The tea trees are really big. It's not so much the case in Nannuo. So that's also why maybe their teas fetch a slightly lower price for the Gushu in Nannuo. Okay, so not all the Gushu are the same, are equal. Maybe that's a topic for another day. I like the way Tafa makes that Nannuo, because I've had a lot of Nannuo which are overly fragrant, and I'm not a big fan. I don't like the way I feel the raw material in Nannuo shouldn't be made too fragrant. It should be actually more muffled, so that you get a lot of returning fragrance and not too much fragrance in the nose. And Tafa processes it like that, so that's why I like this tea. Yeah, you could say it's a very typical also Nannuo tea. It'd be interesting actually to do a side-by-side tasting between the Pasha and the Nannuo. I guess the Pasha will be a bit more bitter, a bit more aggressive. I haven't done it. Maybe that will be my tea session tomorrow, actually. Nannuo has some bitterness, but not too much. So I would say less bitterness than Pasha. Yeah. And it's also an all-rounder. It's also a nice way to discover the essence of Mong Hai tea. Nannuo kind of has a little bit of everything that the Mong Hai area can offer. So you could say it's a tea which has less typicity, but which is a great introduction, and also a kind of a classic as far as Mong Hai tea goes. And Mong Hai tea is a classic if you're a poor tea drinker. And finally, we go north of Nannuo. So north, because it's in the north of Xishuangbanna. Actually, it's near the highest mountain in Xishuangbanna, north of that highest mountain. And this is Naka, and this is my favorite terroir, I would say, personally, because it has a real nice bite. Like, it has some bitterness, some strong bitterness, but of a different nature than Lao Man. It's a more bitterness that's even more on the sides and in the upper part of the mouth. So it's hard to describe. So high bitterness, but short-lived. Then you have a light mouth feel. It's not very mouth coating. Of course, you feel some activity, but it's not very oily. The liquor is not syrupy. And finally, you get really good huigan with the Naka. And I like that up and down because and also the fragrance is very high pitched. It's high altitude tea and it smells very much like a pine forest, I would say. It smells like a high altitude. Like I really like and it's really refreshing. Like you breathe better after you have a few cups of this tea. So I really like Naka. It's also on the pricey side, because it's good tea. It's well sought after. So it's in Mengsong area. In Mengsong, you have a lot of either fragrant teas, either bitter teas with that strange bitterness. And it seems like Naka is the only village that I know that really has both, and that has both of them quite powerful. And that's what makes Naka the most famous village in Mengsong. And it's not so well. It's the furthest village actually in Nannuo, in Mengsong mountain range, which is a big mountain range. So it's about 2-3 hours away from Mong Hai. But anyway, now we can go to Monku. So Monku, last year I took a trip to Monku. It's also an area I'm very interested in, mainly because I like the shape of that area. It's very obvious if you look on Google Earth. It's really two mountains which may form kind of a cone like this, which join in the north. And so you have the eastern mountain and the western mountain. And well, last year I sourced from Nannuo on the east, and then Xiaohusai, Dongguo, Baka. And for the spring harvest this year, I chose to keep only Baka and Dongguo. Not because Xiaohusai or Nannuo are bad, but I think 16 new teas is already a lot, and you have to make some hard choices at some point. So we can start maybe with the Baka, which is, I think, the cheapest tea in our product line this year. And I think, you can say it's kind of a bargain tea. Interestingly, the village is very close to Bingdao. It's just one mountain ridge away, and so that's why when I visited there, I drove up to Baka because I thought that would be interesting to have some tea from the other side of Bingdao. And interestingly, the tea is not too expensive there. It's not so easy to access, although I wouldn't say the village is particularly remote, but it's at very high altitude. From the top of my mind, I think it's 2,200, but I would have to check. But I remember that it's very high altitude tea. But it's young tea, it's plantation tea. But without pesticides. So like natural tea gardens at very high altitude. So it's a really great value. I think you can say it's a daily drinker. Well, some people don't like me saying it's daily drinker because it means that it's bad tea and everything. But of course I curate my selection, so even my cheapest tea must have a good taste. And this one is really, it's actually a really refreshing tea. Of course you won't get really the intensity and the punch that you'd get in a Lao Man E tea or in a Naka. It will be more on the fragrance side. Good fragrance, high mountain fragrance, a bit like Naka fragrance, I would say. And a nice sweetness. Now, of course, don't expect a really deep huigan or a very active mouthfeel. But it's a very solid tea, I think, for every day. And then slightly more upscale, but still accessible. Well, I mean by the 2020 definition of accessible when you look at the price of Pu-erh tea nowadays. Dongguo, so Dongguo is it's more soft than Baka. So It's still in the northern part of the West Mountain. And this one has, it's very juicy, like orange juice, you know. When you drink it, it coats the whole mouth. It's quite balanced. I wouldn't say it has a light bitterness. And yeah, it's very punchy in the mouth. It's very an honest sweetness. It's very straightforward, I would say. It's a very honest tea, I would say. Yeah. And also very brewable. And it's also the kind of tea, maybe you could say it's an upscale daily drinker, you could call it, because it doesn't take much concentration to enjoy its taste, but still it's an intense experience, and you'll get some complexity in the mouth. Don't remember having too much Huigan with that tea, but maybe you'll have a different judgment. Anyway, now I'm gonna go about some more random areas. So let's start with one of one favorite of yours is the Ao Nama, which actually I write Ao Nama, but in that area they call it more like Wanimo. So yeah, but the name of the village is Aonima, like this. That's how it's spelled, but it's pronounced differently. Wanimo, okay? And so it's, well, you remember when I went to that oolong tea plantation with Mr. Huang? It's just on the other side of that natural park. So I was maybe 15 kilometers away, but of course it's a long road. There's only a small windy road there. And so I haven't visited the place yet, but we've had this tea for 3 years, I think, if I remember correctly. And this tea, it's not the cheapest one, but I would say for the price, you get a really intense chachi. I think that's what characterizes this tea. It's really the chachi. So if you're not into body feel, I would say don't buy this tea. It's really a tea for people who are into chachi. You just feel really good when you drink that. Now, beyond the chachi, I would say it has an interesting fragrance, a fairly complex fragrance, and a very good cooling effect. So you will also get some huigan, some chachi. Not much bitterness with this tea, but it's not super soft either. It's in between. So it's you could say it's Jingdong area. Technically, it's in Chuxiong prefecture, but yeah, you could say it's Ailaoshan. Okay, it's Jingdong. The other outlier we have is Lafu. It's the second or third year that we're making this tea, and it's really in an unexpected place that we found that bunch of Gushu. It's at the border with Myanmar and Monglian County, so it's northwest of Jing Mai. And it's an area where people won't tell you that there is particularly good tea, but while scouting the area, we found out some pretty big ancient tea trees in very scarce numbers, and we told a local farmer to process this. We taught him a bit on how to make pu'erh tea, and so that's the result. I think the farmer has been doing a pretty good job in terms of processing tea, considering that he doesn't make a lot of tea. So it's not super, well, it's not super cheap, but it's not very expensive either for the kind of quality you get in terms of Gushu stuff. And I had it this morning, and I found out that it's a bit slow to start, like the first and second brew won't be that intense, but then like the leaves open up and you get that really good, very active mouthfeel that's very pleasant to enjoy. And some huigan and very long brewing tea, it might be also an upscale daily drinker. Oh, there's one thing, it has a bit of smokiness, this one. So it depends, it's up to you if you like smokiness or not, but it's very light. Huh? And finally, we have our 2 cakes from Laos. So just like the Pasha tea, we have the small trees and the big trees from a single garden. So it's a garden that's managed by my friend's family, my friend Hung Keo, who is you could say the technician, the engineer in the NGO we've been working with for 3 years now in Laos. So he's the first guy that we taught about processing Pu-erh tea, because he conducts the training sessions in the villages around. So as far as Laos tea goes, I would say this processing is very good, or according at least to our judgment or standard of good processing. So in terms of, so we like to say that Laos tea is very similar to Guafengjai, but I think when looking at Google Earth, it's a bit more north and it's closer to Mansa, so it's more the northern part of Yiwu. Maybe Ishanmo is a very famous tea garden which is close to Huey Wa. Huey Wa is the village where this tea comes from in Laos. It's mainly a Dai village, like in Jing Mai. And this is very soothing tea. So you still get that Yiwu vibe in which it's a very soft tea. You won't have bitterness with that. And it's really about the silky texture. Yeah, you can say you get that heavy sweetness, although it's not as intense as the high-end Yiwu teas, like Chaongshu, Bai Chaiyuan, Tongqinghe, Bohe Tang. Okay, let's throw those names of famous and extremely expensive Yiwu teas. No, for sure these two teas do not compete in that league. But it's really decent Yiwu style tea, you could say. And when I drink this tea, I feel very, very calm, actually, very quiet afterwards. It's not really an energizing tea. It's a soothing tea, you could say. So, yeah, I like those two teas. Now, the difference in price between those two cakes is not huge, because I think the difference in taste is not as big as what you'd get in, for example, Pasha, the Pasha big trees, this is small trees, or the Lao Man E Shengtai, this is Gushu. So I chose to adjust the price in the middle because I think the difference is not huge, although you will notice it. But yeah, if you don't have a really high standard, actually the small tree version is very good, and it can make a perfect daily drinker. This is the kind of tea that you can grandpa style, and which will never really punish you for doing that. So yeah, as for me, I still prefer to have this one, but maybe then it's psychological. I see the color is darker, and I feel like it tastes better, and so when I compare them, it does taste better because it's written Gushu here. Or maybe you can order a sample of both and make your own mind, your own opinion about this. Yeah, so that was the 16 cakes we have. And so I hope you'll have a good tea experience and good tea sessions with our teas this year. So thank you for watching and see you later. Bye-bye.